I have not taken a breath in 200 years. The man said it so quietly that no one else on the late-night train seemed to hear, but Emma Carter felt the words settle into her chest like cold glass. The overhead lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside the window, the dark blur of the city stretched endlessly, neon reflections sliding across the glass like something alive. Emma tightened her grip on the worn fabric of her coat, her son asleep against her shoulder, his small breaths warm and steady against her neck. She should not have noticed the man at all. He looked like just another passenger, pale, exhausted, leaning slightly as if the weight of standing was too much. But something about him was wrong. Not sick, not weak, just wrong. She had seen sickness before. She had lived around it, worked through it, carried it in hospital waiting rooms and late-night shifts. This was different. This man stood in the aisle without moving, without swaying with the motion of the train, without breathing. Emma shifted, ignoring the instinct that told her to look away, and gently stood up, adjusting her son in her arms. "You can take my seat," she said softly, her voice tired but kind. The man turned his head toward her. Slowly, too slowly. His eyes met hers, and for a second, everything seemed to go quiet. No sound, no motion, just those eyes, pale and sharp, as if they had seen centuries pass and found them all disappointing. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Emma hesitated, then gave a small encouraging nod. "It is okay," she added, shifting her weight as the train rattled over the tracks. "You look like you need it more." He stepped forward, each movement precise, controlled, not a single wasted motion. As he passed her, a wave of cold brushed against her skin, sharp enough to make her inhale. Not the kind of cold from winter air or air conditioning. This felt deeper, like standing too close to something that did not belong in the world of the living. He sat down without a word. Her son stirred slightly, his small hand gripping the front of her sweater. Emma adjusted him again, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, but her attention kept drifting back to the man. He sat perfectly still, no rise of his chest, no subtle shift of breath, nothing. The train lights flickered again, this time longer. Around them, a few passengers glanced up, annoyed, then returned to their phones. Emma swallowed, her heartbeat picking up. She told herself she was imagining things. She had been working too much, too little sleep, too much stress. That was all. Then the man leaned closer, just slightly, close enough that she could hear him over the sound of the train. And that was when he spoke. His voice was low, smooth, ancient in a way she could not explain. "I have not taken a breath in 200 years. Emma froze. Her fingers tightened around her son as a chill spread through her chest. And for the first time that night, she realized that offering her seat might have been the moment her life changed forever. Emma did not move. The words echoed in her mind, repeating in a slow, heavy rhythm that did not match the rattling of the train. 200 years. Not breathing. It made no sense. It could not make sense. Her first instinct was to laugh it off, to dismiss it as a strange joke from a stranger who clearly was not well. But her body refused to follow that logic. Her pulse had already quickened, her skin prickling as if standing too close to a winter wind that had found its way indoors. The man did not look at her again. He sat with his hands resting lightly on his knees, fingers still, posture perfect. Too perfect. Emma shifted her weight, adjusting her son against her shoulder. "That is not funny," she said quietly, her voice barely steady, trying to anchor herself to something normal. The man turned his head just enough for his voice to reach her again, low and controlled. It was not meant to be. A silence followed. Not the ordinary silence of strangers ignoring each other, but something heavier, stretching between them like an invisible thread. Emma swallowed and glanced around the train. People were still scrolling through their phones, a couple arguing softly near the far door, a teenager with headphones nodding to music only he could hear. Normal. Everything looked normal. Except it did not feel normal anymore. The overhead lights flickered again. Longer this time, casting shadows that moved a fraction too slow across the metal walls. Emma's son stirred in her arms. His small hand pressed against her collarbone, then shifted, reaching outward without opening his eyes. His fingers brushed the man's sleeve. The reaction was immediate. The air changed. Emma felt it before she understood it. A drop in temperature, so sharp it stole the warmth from her breath. The man's head snapped toward the child, faster than anything human should move. His eyes, which had been pale and distant, darkened, something ancient flickering beneath the surface like embers catching fire after centuries of ash. Emma pulled her son back instinctively, her heart pounding now. "Do not touch him," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The man froze. Completely. Then, slowly, he looked at her. And for the first time, there was something in his expression that had not been there before. Not hunger. Not anger. Something closer to recognition. "He is yours," the man said, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. Emma tightened her hold on her son. "Of course he is." The man studied her, then the child, his gaze lingering a moment too long. Around them, a subtle tension began to build. Two men entered the train car from the next door, both dressed in dark coats despite the mild weather. They did not look around like new passengers. They scanned. Precise. Intentional. Their eyes moved from face to face, searching. Emma noticed them immediately, though she could not say why. Something about the way they moved felt wrong. Familiar in the same way danger often did. The man in her seat noticed them too. His posture did not change, but the air around him seemed to grow heavier, like a storm building without thunder. The lights flickered again. This time, a low hum followed, the kind that made the metal beneath their feet vibrate faintly. One of the men paused mid-aisle, his gaze locking onto the seated stranger. For a fraction of a second, something passed between them. Not a look. Not recognition in any normal sense. Something deeper. Older. Emma felt it like pressure in her ears. The man beside her leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping so low only she could hear. "You should move to the next car." Emma blinked. "What now?" he said, not raising his voice, but the command in it was absolute. Emma hesitated, her instincts warring with her fear. She did not understand what was happening, but every part of her body was screaming that something was about to break. Her son shifted again, his head resting against her shoulder, completely unaware. The two men in dark coats started walking toward them. Slow, deliberate. The hum in the train grew louder. The lights dimmed, and for the first time in 200 years, the man who had not breathed felt something close to anticipation. Emma took a step back, then another, and as she turned to move toward the next car, she realized with a cold certainty that whatever she had stepped into, there was no stepping out again. Emma did not look back. She moved quickly, one step, then another, her boots striking the metal floor of the train with a rhythm that felt far too loud in the thickening silence. Her son shifted slightly in her arms, murmuring in his sleep, his breath warm against her neck, grounding her in something real as everything else began to feel unreal. Behind her, the two men in dark coats continued forward, their footsteps measured, unhurried, certain. Emma reached the narrow space between train cars, her hand gripping the cold metal bar as she pushed the door open. The moment it slid aside, a sharp rush of colder air hit her face, carrying with it a faint metallic scent she could not place. She stepped through. The door began to close behind her, but just before it sealed, she glanced back. The man she had given her seat to had not moved from his place, but the space around him had changed. The overhead lights above him dimmed, flickering unevenly, casting long shadows that stretched across the floor like reaching hands. One of the men in dark coats stopped a few feet away from him. The other remained behind, blocking the aisle. "We have been looking for you," the first man said, his voice low but carrying clearly through the car. The seated man did not respond. He did not need to. The air itself seemed to tighten around him, as if the space he occupied belonged to him alone. Emma's heart pounded as the door slid shut, cutting off the rest of the scene, but not before she saw something that made her breath catch. The man in her seat lifted his gaze, and his eyes were no longer pale. They burned. Not bright, not glowing, but alive in a way that felt wrong, like fire buried deep beneath ice. The door sealed with a heavy click. Emma stumbled slightly into the next car, catching herself against a pole. This car was quieter, nearly empty. A single older woman sat near the far end, staring out the window. A young man dozed with his head against the glass. No one looked up. No one noticed her. Emma pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Her mind raced, struggling to make sense of what she had just seen. None of it fit. None of it followed any rule she understood. Her son shifted again, his small hand gripping the fabric of her shirt. "Mom," he murmured softly, still half asleep. "It is cold." Emma tightened her hold on him, rubbing his back gently. "I know, baby," she whispered. "It will be okay." But even as she said it, she was not sure she believed it. The train lurched slightly as it picked up speed, the hum beneath her feet growing louder. Then the lights flickered again, not just a dimming this time, but a full drop into darkness for a single long second. When the lights returned, the temperature in the car had dropped. Noticeably, Emma could see her breath now, faint against the air. The older woman at the end of the car frowned, pulling her coat tighter. The young man stirred, glancing around in confusion before settling again. Emma's eyes moved toward the door she had just come through. It remained closed, silent, but something pressed against it. Not physically, not something she could see, but she felt it. A presence. Heavy, expanding, like something vast contained in too small a space. Then the door handle twitched. Once. Slowly. Emma's breath caught. Her body tensed, every instinct screaming at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The train was moving too fast. The windows showed only darkness outside. The handle stilled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from the other side of the door, a sound reached her. Not a voice. Not clearly, but something close. Low. Controlled. Dangerous. Emma could not make out the words, but she understood the tone. Authority. Command. And beneath it, something older than fear. Something that made even the air hesitate. Her son stirred again, this time opening his eyes slightly. He looked toward the door, his expression soft with sleep, but then it changed. His small brow furrowed, and he leaned closer into her. "Mom," he whispered, his voice quiet but certain. "The man is not sick." Emma's heart skipped. "I know," she whispered back, her eyes never leaving the door. A second passed, then another, and in that suspended moment, Emma realized something she had not allowed herself to think until now. The man she had helped was not the one in danger. The danger was everything else around him. And somehow, without understanding how or why, she had just stepped directly into his world. The door did not open. Not yet. But the pressure behind it grew stronger, like something vast pressing against a fragile boundary that could break at any moment. Emma stood frozen, her arms wrapped tightly around her son, her fingers pressing into his back as if she could shield him from something she did not understand. The air in the train car felt thinner now, colder, every breath sharper than the last. Then, without warning, the lights flickered again. Once, twice, and on the third flicker, the door slid open. Slowly. No one in the car screamed. No one reacted the way they should have. It was as if the moment slipped past them, unnoticed, unseen. But Emma saw it. She felt it. The man stepped through. The same man she had given her seat to. But not the same presence. Something about him had changed. No, not changed. Revealed. He moved with the same precise control, but now the air shifted around him, bending subtly, as if the world itself adjusted to his presence. Behind him, the two men in dark coats followed, their expressions no longer neutral. Tense. Focused. Ready. Emma's breath caught as his gaze found her immediately, as if he had known exactly where she would be the entire time. He did not look at anyone else. Not the older woman. Not the sleeping passenger. Only her. And for a moment, everything else faded. "You did not move far enough," he said quietly. Emma swallowed, her voice barely steady. "You told me to leave." "I told you to survive," he replied. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. She did not yet understand. One of the men in dark coats stepped forward. "Step away from her," he said, his voice firm, controlled, but edged with something dangerous. "This does not concern the human." The man's expression did not change, but the temperature dropped again, sharper this time, biting against Emma's skin. "Everything that touches her concerns me," he said. The second man moved to the side, subtly cutting off any path behind Emma. "You have been absent for too long," he said. "The council has made its decision." A pause. Then, more quietly, "You are to return, or be brought back." The man's gaze did not leave Emma. "I do not answer to the council." "You used to," the first man replied. Emma's heart pounded as she looked between them, the tension rising with each word, each movement so controlled it felt more dangerous than any open threat. Her son shifted again, lifting his head slightly, his eyes half open. He looked directly at the man standing before them. Not afraid. Not confused. Just watching. The man noticed. For the briefest moment, something flickered in his expression again. That same strange recognition. Then it was gone. The first man in the dark coat took another step forward. Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be. The response was immediate. The air snapped. Not a sound. Not a visible force. But something invisible surged outward from the man, pressing against the space, distorting it. The lights above them shattered in a sharp burst, glass raining down in glittering fragments that never quite seemed to reach the floor. Time itself seemed to hesitate. The two men froze mid-motion, their bodies locking as if held in place by something far beyond physical strength. Emma gasped, instinctively pulling her son closer, her back pressing against the wall. The man stepped forward. One step, then another, each movement effortless. Absolute. He stopped just inches from her, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him, deeper than before, ancient and unyielding. You should not have been involved in this, he said softly. Emma met his gaze, her fear still there, but something else rising with it. I just gave you my seat. Silence. Then, very faintly, something changed in his eyes. Not softness, not warmth, but something that had not existed moments before. Consideration. That is precisely the problem, he said. Behind him, the two men in dark coats strained against whatever held them, their movements jerking slightly, like something beginning to break free. The train roared forward into the darkness, faster now, louder, as if the world outside had no place in what was unfolding inside. Emma realized then, with a clarity that made her chest tighten, that this was not an accident, not a random encounter. Something had been set in motion the moment she chose kindness over caution. And now, standing inches from a man who had not breathed in 200 years, she understood one terrifying truth. He was not the one trapped on this train. Everyone else was. The air did not return to normal. It did not soften. It held, tense and heavy, as if the entire train had become a sealed space outside the rules Emma had known her entire life. The two men behind him strained harder now, their bodies trembling against the invisible force that pinned them in place. A faint cracking sound echoed through the car, not from the metal or the glass, but from something unseen, like pressure building inside a structure that was never meant to hold it. Emma could not breathe properly, not because the air was gone, but because something about it felt wrong. Thicker, colder. Watching, the man in front of her tilted his head slightly, studying her face as if committing it to memory. You are afraid, he said, not as a question. Emma swallowed. Yes. Her voice was steady, even though her hands were not. He seemed to consider that, his gaze dropping briefly to the child in her arms. The boy was awake now, his small fingers gripping her sleeve, his eyes fixed on the man with a strange calm that did not belong to a child in this situation. You should be, the man said quietly. Behind him, one of the trapped men let out a strained breath, forcing his arm forward by inches. You cannot hold us forever, he said, his voice breaking through the pressure with effort. The council will not allow this. The man did not turn. The council has allowed worse, he replied. Another crack, louder this time. The invisible hold flickered. Emma felt it, like a sudden shift in gravity. The man's expression changed by a fraction. Not concern, not fear, calculation. He stepped closer to Emma, reducing the distance between them to nothing, close enough that she could see the faint lines beneath his skin, like something ancient etched into his very being. Listen to me, he said, his voice lower now, urgent in a way it had not been before. When that breaks, you will go to the end of this car. There is an emergency exit. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. Emma stared at him. What about you? I will not need it, he said. Another sharp crack split the air. One of the men broke free enough to drop to one knee, his hands slamming against the floor to steady himself. His eyes snapped up, locking onto the man in front of Emma with something close to fury. You cannot protect her, he said, his voice stronger now. You know what she is. Emma's heart skipped. What does that mean? She demanded, her voice rising despite herself. The man in front of her did not answer immediately. His gaze flicked to the one who had spoken, then back to her. For the first time, something like tension appeared in his posture. Not weakness, but awareness. They are guessing, he said. They do not know. The second man surged forward, breaking free enough to stand, though his movements were still slowed, as if pushing through resistance. "We felt it the moment she touched you," he said. "The surge. The mark. It has been silent for centuries." Emma shook her head, confusion flooding her. "I do not know what you are talking about." The man in front of her lifted his hand. Slowly, carefully. He did not touch her. Not yet. But the air between them shifted again, reacting to the movement. "Neither did the last one," he said quietly. Before it was too late. Emma's breath caught. Too late for what? The answer did not come. Instead, the pressure shattered. The invisible force collapsed all at once, like glass breaking under too much strain. The two men lunged forward, their movements snapping back to full speed, their presence suddenly overwhelming the small space. The train lights burst again, plunging the car into flickering chaos. Emma barely had time to react. The man moved, not fast in a way she could track, just gone from where he stood, reappearing between her and the attackers, his presence expanding like a storm unleashed. The impact was silent but devastating. One of the men was thrown backward into the metal wall, the force bending it inward with a deep, echoing groan. The other staggered, catching himself, his eyes blazing with something inhuman. Emma stumbled back, clutching her son, her heart racing as the world around her unraveled into something violent and unreal. But even in the chaos, one thing became clear. This was not a fight she had stepped into. This was something far older. And somehow, without knowing how, she had just become the center of it. The train screamed against the tracks as if it could feel what was happening inside it. Metal groaned beneath the strain of forces it was never built to endure, the walls bending slightly where the impact had struck. Emma staggered backward again, her shoulder hitting the cold surface behind her as she struggled to keep her balance. Her son clung to her now, fully awake, his small arms wrapped tightly around her neck, his face buried against her shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling but quiet, as if he somehow understood that loud sounds did not belong in this moment. Emma could not answer. Her eyes were locked on the man standing between her and the two attackers. He did not move like anyone she had ever seen. Not fast, not slow, just precise. Every motion exact, controlled, inevitable. The man who had been thrown against the wall pushed himself up, the metal behind him still dented inward from the force. He did not look injured. He looked angry. His eyes, no longer human, reflected the flickering lights with a sharp, unnatural clarity. "You are weaker than before," he said, his voice low, steady despite the chaos. The council was right. The man in front of Emma did not turn. "The council has always been wrong," he replied. The second attacker moved first this time, faster than Emma could follow, crossing the distance in an instant. But the man was already there, intercepting, stopping. The collision made no sound, yet the force of it rippled outward, shaking the entire car. Windows trembled. The overhead bars rattled violently. Emma felt the shock travel through the floor into her legs, nearly knocking her off her feet again. The attacker was forced back, sliding several feet before catching himself. His expression shifted, no longer confident. Not afraid, but uncertain. That alone felt like a warning. "In this," the first man said, stepping forward again. "You know what happens if she awakens." Emma's breath caught. The words hit her harder than anything else had. "Awakens what?" she said, her voice sharper now, cutting through the tension despite the fear still gripping her chest. For a moment, no one answered. The man in front of her stood still, his back to her, but she could feel it. A shift, subtle, but real. Then he spoke. "You need to leave," he said again, more firmly now. Emma shook her head. "Not until you tell me what is happening." Silence stretched for a single second too long. Then the first attacker smiled faintly, as if something had finally fallen into place. "He will not tell you," he said, "because if you understand, you will not follow him. You will run." Emma's grip tightened around her son. Run from what? The answer came from the man in front of her, his voice quieter now, but heavier. "From me." The words settled into the space between them, colder than the air itself. Emma felt something twist in her chest, not just fear, but something deeper. Confusion. Resistance. She had seen what he could do. She had felt the danger in him. And yet he had told her to run. He had protected her. That contradiction refused to settle into anything simple. The second attacker moved again, this time circling, trying to find an opening. The first followed, slower, more deliberate, their movements coordinated without words. "You cannot keep this hidden," the first said. "Not anymore. The mark is active. Every house will feel it." The man's hand flexed slightly at his side, the only sign that the words affected him. "Then they will come," he said. "And they will fail." The confidence in his voice was absolute. But beneath it, Emma sensed something else. Not doubt, but inevitability. Like he already knew how this would end. The train lights flickered again, then dimmed lower than before, casting everything in a dim, shifting glow. The outside world had disappeared entirely now, the windows showing only darkness. The car felt isolated, cut off, like it no longer belonged to the world Emma understood. Her son lifted his head slightly, his small voice barely audible. "Mom," he whispered, "they are scared of him." Emma looked at the two attackers. It was subtle, easy to miss, but her son was right. Beneath their control, beneath their precision, there was tension. Not just focus, not just caution, fear. The realization hit her all at once. The man in front of her was not just dangerous. He was something they did not want to face alone. And somehow, without understanding how, she had been placed at the center of that fear. The man took a single step forward. The air tightened again, sharper this time, more focused. "This ends now," he said quietly. And for the first time since this began, Emma understood that whatever happened next would not just change her life. It would decide it. The moment he stepped forward, the world seemed to tighten around him. Not collapse, not explode, but narrow, as if everything that existed had been forced to focus on a single point. Him. The two men felt it instantly. Their movements slowed, not because they chose to, but because something in the air resisted them. Invisible, unyielding. The first man's expression hardened, his stance shifting as if preparing for something far more serious than before. "Do not," he said, his voice lower now, edged with something that had not been there before. "Caution. If you release that much power here, you will expose everything." The man did not stop walking. "It is already exposed." Each step echoed without sound, but Emma felt it in her chest, like pressure building with every inch he moved. The second attacker lunged again, faster, more desperate, his hand reaching forward as if aiming for something specific, not the man, but past him, toward Emma. The reaction was immediate. The man vanished from where he stood. One moment he was there. The next, he was not. Then he was in front of the attacker, his hand raised, not striking, not yet, just stopping. The attacker froze mid-motion, his body locking in place as if caught in something unseen. His eyes widened, not in pain, in realization. "You should not be able to do that," he said, his voice strained. "Not after all this time." The man's voice was calm, absolute. "And yet I can." Behind him, the first attacker moved, circling, searching for an opening, his movements sharper now, more aggressive. "You are proving our point," he said. "You are unstable. The council will not tolerate this." The man tilted his head slightly, as if considering the words. "The council has not tolerated me for centuries," he said. "This changes nothing." Emma stood frozen, her mind struggling to keep up with what she was seeing. Nothing about this followed any rule she understood. The speed, the control, the way the world itself seemed to bend around him. Her son tightened his hold on her again, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, he is not like the others." Emma did not respond. She could not, because she knew her son was right. The man was not just different. He was something more, something the others could not match. The first attacker made his move. Fast, precise, a strike aimed not at the man, but at the space beside him, anticipating movement, predicting where he would be. But the man did not move the way they expected. He stepped forward instead, into the attack. The moment of contact never came. The air itself seemed to reject it. The attacker's motion halted inches away, his body trembling against an invisible barrier that did not exist, and yet could not be passed. The man leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping to something colder than before. "You are not here to take me back," he said. "You are here to test me." Silence. The attacker's expression shifted, just enough to confirm it. The man's eyes darkened. "Then you have your answer." What happened next did not feel like an action. It felt like a decision. The pressure in the air collapsed inward, then surged outward in a controlled wave. Not violent, not chaotic, precise. The two attackers were forced back at the same time, their bodies pushed several feet across the floor, stopping only when they struck the far end of the car. The metal behind them bent slightly under the force, the sound low and deep, like something breaking far below the surface. Emma gasped, instinctively stepping back, her heart racing as the power in the air settled again. But not completely. It lingered, focused, waiting. The man stood still once more, his back to her, his posture unchanged, as if what had just happened required no effort at all. "You will leave," he said without turning. It was not a suggestion. The two men struggled to their feet again, slower now, their movements less certain. They looked at him differently this time. Not just with caution, with calculation. "This is not over," the first said. "It has already begun," the man replied. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything before. Emma felt them settle into her chest, into her thoughts, into something deeper she could not name. Begun. That meant this was only the start. The realization sent a cold wave through her body. Because if this was the beginning, then whatever came next would be worse. Much worse. The train continued forward, faster now, the darkness outside absolute, as if the world beyond had disappeared entirely. And in that sealed, shifting space, Emma understood something she had not wanted to accept until now. This was not a chance encounter. This was not a mistake. She had been placed here, in this moment, with him, and whatever force had done that was far from finished. The silence that followed did not feel like relief. It felt like the pause before something worse. The two men did not attack again. They stood at the far end of the car, their posture tense, their eyes fixed on him with a new level of caution. Not fear alone, calculation. As if they were no longer testing his strength, but measuring the consequences of pushing further. The train rattled beneath them, the sound louder now, almost aggressive, as if the speed itself was trying to outrun what was happening inside. Emma's breathing slowed slightly, but her heart still pounded, each beat sharp and unsteady. She shifted her son higher against her shoulder, her hand moving instinctively over his back, grounding herself in his warmth. The man remained where he stood, his back still to her, his presence steady, unshaken. But something in the air had changed. Not just tension, attention, focused, distant. Like something far beyond this train had just turned its gaze toward them. The first attacker spoke again, his voice quieter now, more controlled. "They felt that," he said. "Every house. Every elder. You know what that means." The man did not respond immediately. For the first time since this began, he seemed to pause. Not in hesitation. In awareness. Then, slowly, he turned his head, just enough to glance toward Emma. The look was brief, but it carried weight. "Yes," he said. "I know." Emma's chest tightened. "Know what?" she asked, her voice breaking through before she could stop it. The two men glanced at her. Not dismissively this time. With interest. The second attacker tilted his head slightly. "You still do not understand," he said. "You should have felt it." Emma shook her head, confusion mixing with rising frustration. Felt what? The first attacker took a slow step forward, not aggressive, but deliberate. "When you touched him," he said. The surge. The reaction. That was not random. Emma's mind flashed back to the moment her fingers brushed the man's sleeve. The cold. The shift. The way everything had felt wrong for just a second. "That was just because he is," she stopped, the word refusing to form. The attacker's faint smile returned. "Because he is what?" he asked quietly. Emma did not answer. She did not know how to answer. The man in front of her spoke instead. "Enough," he said. The word carried weight, pressing into the space, forcing the conversation to stop. The first attacker's expression hardened again. "You cannot hide this from her," he said. "Not anymore. The mark has awakened." Emma's breath caught. What mark? Silence followed. The man in front of her did not turn this time. He did not explain, but his hand moved. Slowly, deliberately. He lifted it slightly, not toward the attackers, but toward her. Not touching, just close enough for her to feel the air change again, sharper, more focused. Emma felt it instantly. A warmth. Not outside. Inside. Her skin prickled, a strange sensation spreading from her wrist upward, subtle at first, then stronger. She gasped, looking down. At first, she saw nothing. Then, faintly, beneath her skin, something shifted. A pattern. barely visible, like light moving through water. It flickered once, then faded, leaving only the memory of it behind. Emma's heart raced. "What is that?" she whispered. The first attacker answered this time, his voice low. "That is why you matter." The second added, "That is why he cannot let you go." Emma looked up, her gaze locking onto the man in front of her. "Is that true?" she asked, her voice unsteady now. He did not answer immediately. The silence stretched, heavy, charged with everything unspoken between them. Then, finally, he spoke. "I was not supposed to find you," he said quietly. The words sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Find me," she repeated. The man took a slow breath. "Or at least, he mimicked the motion. And yet you offered me your seat," he continued. "You chose to step closer instead of away." Emma's fingers tightened slightly against her son. "I was just trying to help." His gaze held hers, steady, unyielding. "That is what makes this dangerous." The train lights flickered again, dimming lower than before. The hum beneath them deepened, almost like a warning. At the far end of the car, the two attackers exchanged a glance. A silent decision passed between them. The first stepped back slightly. "It does not matter now," he said. "They are already coming." Emma's breath caught. Who is coming? The answer did not come from them. It came from the man standing in front of her, his voice lower now, carrying something heavier than before. "Everyone," he said. And in that single word, Emma understood that whatever she had just become part of was no longer contained to this train, this moment, or this man. It was something much larger, and it was already closing in. The word echoed in Emma's mind long after he said it. Everyone. Not someone. Not a group. Everyone. The weight of it pressed down on her chest, making each breath feel thinner than the last. The train did not slow. If anything, it moved faster, the metal beneath their feet vibrating with a deep, relentless force that felt almost alive. Emma's fingers tightened around her son as she looked at the man in front of her, searching his face for something she could understand. "Then we need to get off this train," she said, her voice steadier now, driven by instinct rather than fear. "At the next stop, we leave." The man's gaze did not waver, but something in it shifted again, subtle and unreadable. "There is no next stop," he said. Emma frowned. "That is not possible. Every train has stops." The first attacker gave a quiet, humorless breath. "Not this one," he said. Emma's stomach dropped. She turned slightly, looking down the length of the car, then toward the windows. The darkness outside remained absolute. No lights, no signs, no movement, just endless black. Her pulse spiked again. "What did you do?" she demanded, looking back at the two men. "We did not do this," the second replied. "He did." Emma's gaze snapped back to the man in front of her. "You trapped us here." "No," he said quietly. "I contained this." The distinction did not make her feel better. Contained what? He did not answer immediately. His attention had shifted again, not to the attackers this time, but beyond them, past the walls of the train, past the darkness outside, as if he could sense something approaching from a distance no one else could perceive. The air changed again, not colder, heavier, pressed down by something vast and distant, yet rapidly closing in. Emma felt it in her chest, in the back of her neck, in the way the silence deepened between every sound. Her son stirred again, lifting his head slightly, his eyes scanning the empty car with growing unease. "Mom," he whispered, "there are more." Emma's breath caught. "Where?" He pointed toward the window. "Out there." Emma turned, her heart pounding, forcing herself to look. At first, she saw nothing. Just darkness. Then, slowly, faint shapes began to form. Not reflections. Not lights. Movement. Something pacing the train from the outside. Keeping up with its speed. Watching. Her stomach twisted. "That is not possible," she whispered. The first attacker stepped back again, his posture shifting from confrontation to readiness. "It is very possible," he said. "And now they know exactly where we are." The man in front of her remained still, but Emma could feel the tension building in him now. Not visible, not obvious, but present, like a storm gathering beneath a calm surface. "They should not be this close already," he said, almost to himself. The second attacker gave a short, sharp response. "You announced yourself," he said. "What did you expect?" The man's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of irritation she had seen from him. "I expected time." Emma shook her head, her thoughts racing. "Who are they?" she asked. No one answered immediately. Then, finally, the first attacker spoke. "They are what remains when power is left unchecked for too long," he said. "They are the ones who answer when something ancient wakes up." Emma's heart pounded harder. "And that is me," she said quietly, the realization forming whether she wanted it to or not. The silence that followed was answer enough. Her grip on her son tightened instinctively. "I did not ask for this," she said, her voice breaking slightly. The man turned to her fully now. For the first time since this began, he stepped closer without urgency, without force. Just presence. "No," he said. "You did not." The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than anything else had, because it meant he understood, and that made this real in a way nothing else had. The train shuddered suddenly, a violent jolt that sent a ripple through the entire car. The lights flickered wildly, then dimmed to a low, unstable glow. Outside the window, the shapes grew clearer, taller, faster, keeping pace effortlessly. Emma took a step back, her heart racing as she watched them move. "They are going to get in," she whispered. "Yes," the man said. No hesitation. No denial. Just certainty. Emma's breath hitched. "Then what do we do?" The man looked at her, his gaze steady, unyielding, and for the first time, something like a decision settled into his expression. "You stay behind me," he said. The simplicity of the command cut through everything else. Emma hesitated for only a second. Then she moved. One step closer, standing where he had told her to stand. Because for reasons she could not explain, in a situation that made no sense, surrounded by things she could not understand, there was only one thing she was certain of. He was the only thing standing between her and whatever was coming next. The first impact did not sound like glass breaking. It sounded like something alive striking something that refused to yield. The entire train car shuddered violently, metal screaming along the sides as one of the shapes outside collided with the window. Emma flinched, instinctively ducking her head as she tightened her hold on her son, her heart slamming against her ribs. The lights flickered hard, nearly going out, then surged back in a dim, unstable glow. Outside, the shapes were no longer distant. They pressed close now, their forms clearer against the glass. Tall, lean, moving with a speed that did not match the train, as if the train itself had slowed for them. One of them turned its head. Slowly, its face came into view for a fraction of a second. Pale, too pale, eyes that reflected nothing. Not light, not life. Emma sucked in a sharp breath. "What are they?" she whispered. The man in front of her did not look back. "They are what happens when something is left between worlds for too long," he said. "Neither alive nor gone. Only waiting." Another impact. Harder this time. The glass bowed inward, a spiderweb of cracks spreading across the surface but not breaking through. Yet, the two men behind them shifted position, no longer focused on him alone. Now they watched the windows. The first attacker spoke under his breath. "This is escalating faster than expected." The second replied, "Because of her." Emma heard it. She felt it. The blame. The attention. It pressed against her just as much as whatever was outside. The man stepped slightly to the side, adjusting his position so that he stood directly between her and the nearest window. A shield. Unspoken, but absolute. "Stay behind me," he repeated. Emma nodded, though she was not sure if he could see it. Her legs felt unsteady, but she did not move away. Her son clung to her tighter now, his small body tense, his face turned away from the windows. "Mom," he whispered, "they are looking at me." Emma's stomach dropped. She shifted him so his face pressed into her shoulder, shielding his view. "Do not look," she said softly. "Just stay with me." The train jolted again, this time stronger. The lights cut out completely for a full second, plunging everything into darkness. When they returned, one of the shapes was no longer outside. It was inside, at the far end of the car. No sound of entry, no broken glass. Just there, standing in the aisle. Emma froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at it. Up close, it looked almost human. Almost. But the proportions were wrong. The stillness was wrong. Its chest did not rise. Its eyes did not blink. It simply stood there, its head tilted slightly, as if observing them. Then it took a step forward. The movement was smooth. Too smooth. The man in front of Emma did not hesitate. The air around him tightened instantly, a focused pressure that pushed outward, stopping the thing mid-step. It did not resist at first. It simply paused, as if adjusting. Then its head tilted the other way, and it pushed back. The invisible force bent, not breaking, but straining. The two attackers reacted at the same time, stepping back, their attention fully on the new threat. The first spoke, his voice sharper now. This was not part of the council order. The second answered, quieter. It is not the council. Emma's pulse spiked. Then who is it? No one answered. The thing in the aisle moved again. Slower this time. Testing. The pressure between it and the man shifted, tightening, compressing the space until the air itself seemed to vibrate. Emma felt it in her bones, a deep, unnatural tension that made her chest ache. The man's voice came low and controlled. Do not move, he said, not to the attackers. To her. Emma stayed perfectly still. Even her breathing slowed, shallow and quiet. The thing took another step. Closer now. Close enough that she could see the faint cracks along its skin, like something that had been broken and forced back together. Its gaze shifted. From the man. To her. Emma felt it lock onto her, cold and absolute. And then, for the first time, it spoke. Its voice was not loud, not distorted, just empty. You should not exist. Emma's heart stopped for a fraction of a second. The words hit her harder than anything else had. Not because of the threat, but because of the certainty. The man in front of her moved instantly. Not to attack, to block. He stepped fully into its line of sight, cutting it off from her completely. She does, he said. His voice carried something new now. Not just control, not just power, something sharper, protective, final. The thing paused. Its head tilted again, as if considering that statement. Then the entire train shook violently, the force nearly throwing Emma off her feet as more impacts slammed against the sides. Outside, more shapes gathered, their movements faster, more aggressive, closing in from every direction. The car was no longer just under threat. It was surrounded. Completely. Emma realized then, with a clarity that cut through the fear, that this was not a hunt. This was a convergence. Everything was coming here. For her. And the only thing standing between her and them was a man who had not breathed in 200 years, and who had just decided, without hesitation, that she would not be taken. The thing did not attack immediately. It stood there, inches from the invisible force that held it back, its hollow gaze fixed on the man as if measuring something beyond strength. The train trembled again, harder this time, a deep violent shudder that rippled through the floor and up into Emma's bones. Outside, the shapes pressed closer, their movements faster now, more erratic, as if drawn by something they could no longer ignore. Emma's breath came in short, controlled pulls as she tightened her hold on her son, pressing him close, shielding his face against her shoulder. She could feel his heartbeat now, fast but steady, grounding her in a way nothing else could. The man did not move. Not yet. But the air around him began to change again. Not outward this time. Inward. Compressing. Focused into something sharper. More dangerous. The two men behind him recognized it instantly. The first stepped back, his voice tense. If you do this here, you will tear through everything. The man's voice was calm. Final. Then it will hold. The second attacker shook his head slightly. You cannot control it at this scale. The man did not respond. Because he already was. The pressure in the air intensified, no longer pushing outward, but locking into place around the thing in front of him. It resisted now. Actively. Its body shifted, the faint cracks along its skin spreading slightly, as if something inside it strained to break free. Its head tilted again, but this time the motion was sharper. More aware. You remember, it said, its empty voice carrying something new. Recognition. The man's expression did not change, but the air tightened further. I do not forget, he replied. The thing took another step forward. Against the force. The space between them compressed, bending the light, distorting the edges of everything around them. Emma felt it pressing against her chest, making it harder to breathe, harder to think. Her vision blurred slightly at the edges as the tension built. Mom, her son whispered weakly, it hurts. Emma's heart clenched. She dropped slightly to one knee, trying to lower him, to shield him from whatever pressure was filling the air. Stay with me, she murmured, her voice shaking now despite her effort to stay calm. The man heard it. For the first time since this began, something in his control shifted. Not breaking, redirecting. The pressure in the air eased slightly around Emma and the child, just enough for her to draw a fuller breath. The thing noticed. Its head snapped toward her again. There, it said. That is the source. The words hit like a physical force. Emma froze, her entire body going still as that empty gaze locked onto her again. The two attackers reacted instantly. Not toward the man. Toward her. The first moved, fast, cutting across the space, his hand reaching forward. Do not let it anchor, he said sharply. The man moved at the same time. Faster. He intercepted the motion with a single step, his presence slamming into the space between them like an unbreakable wall. The impact stopped everything. The attacker froze inches away, unable to push forward, his expression twisting with effort. The man's voice dropped, colder than before. You will not touch her. The certainty in it left no room for argument. The second attacker hesitated, just for a moment. That hesitation cost him. The thing in the aisle moved again, this time faster. Its body blurred forward, slipping through the pressure for a fraction of a second, enough to close the distance. Emma barely had time to react. The man turned. Not fully, just enough. His hand lifted, and the air snapped back into place, harder than before, catching the thing mid-motion, suspending it inches from her. Close enough that she could see the fractures in its skin, the hollow stillness behind its eyes. Close enough to feel the cold radiating from it, deeper than anything she had felt before. The man stood between them again, his posture unyielding, his control absolute. But now Emma understood something she had not before. He was not just holding them back. He was holding everything together. The train, the space, the moment. All of it balanced on something she could not see, but could feel slipping. The first attacker spoke again, his voice lower now, urgent. You cannot maintain this, he said. Not with her here. It is drawing too much. The man did not turn. Then they will have to wait. The response was simple, but final. Outside, the impacts grew stronger, the walls of the train beginning to warp slightly under the repeated force. Inside, the pressure built again, tighter, sharper, every second stretching thinner than the last. Emma realized then, with a clarity that cut through everything else, that this was not a battle that could be won by strength alone. This was a threshold, and they were standing on the edge of it. And if it broke, there would be nothing left to hold any of them in place. The pressure did not break. It bent. It stretched. It held, but only barely, like something ancient straining against a boundary that had been forced into place too quickly. Emma could feel it in every part of her body now, a deep, aching tension that made her muscles tremble and her thoughts slow. The man still stood between her and everything else, unmoving, unyielding, but the air around him had changed. It was no longer just controlled. It was strained. The thing suspended in front of him twitched again, its fractured skin shifting as if something inside it was trying to remember how to move. Its hollow gaze flickered, not with life, but with awareness that did not belong to this world. You are weakening, it said softly. The words were not loud, but they carried, threading through the pressure, reaching Emma like a whisper pressed directly into her mind. The man did not respond, but Emma felt the truth of it. Not in his stance, not in his voice. In the space itself, the balance was slipping. Her son shifted weakly in her arms, his small hand clutching her sleeve, his breath uneven now. Mom, he whispered, his voice faint. It feels heavy. Emma's heart tightened painfully. She dropped lower, one knee against the cold floor, trying to shield him again, her body instinctively curling around his. Stay with me, she said softly, though her own voice felt distant to her ears. The man heard it again, and this time something changed. Not in the force. In him. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at her. Really look at her. Not as a variable. Not as a problem. As something that mattered. The moment stretched. Quiet. Fragile. Then he moved. Not forward. Not toward the threat. Toward her. One step. The pressure shifted instantly, tightening behind him, loosening slightly in front of her, as if he was redistributing something invisible to keep her protected. The two attackers saw it, and they understood. The first spoke quickly, his voice sharp with urgency. You are dividing your focus. That will break it. The man did not stop. Then it will break, he said. Emma's breath caught. He stopped directly in front of her now, close enough that the cold around him wrapped fully into her space, but softer this time, controlled, directed away from her child. He lowered slightly, bringing himself closer to her level, his gaze steady, intense, but no longer distant. "Listen to me," he said quietly. Emma nodded, unable to speak, her heart pounding as she held her son tighter. "This will not hold much longer," he continued. "When it breaks, you will not stay here." "I am not leaving you," she said immediately, the words coming before she could stop them. His expression shifted. Not surprise. Something deeper. Something that had not existed in him until this moment. "You already changed that," he said softly. Emma shook her head, confusion and fear mixing together. "I do not even know who you are." A pause. Then, finally, he answered. "Lucian," he said. The name settled into the space between them, heavy with something ancient and unspoken. Emma swallowed. "Lucian," she repeated quietly, as if grounding him in something human. For the first time, his gaze softened. Not fully, but enough to feel. "Emma," he said in return. Not a question, a certainty. The moment held, just for a second, a fragile stillness in the middle of everything breaking around them. Then the train shook again, harder than before. The walls groaned loudly, metal bending under the pressure from outside. Cracks spread further across the windows, thin lines branching outward like fractures in ice. The thing in the air jerked suddenly, pushing harder, its form distorting as it fought against the invisible force holding it in place. Behind Lucian, the pressure faltered. Just slightly, but enough. The two attackers reacted instantly. The first broke through the weakened field, his movement snapping back to full speed as he lunged forward. "Now," he said sharply. Lucian moved, faster than before, but this time, not just to stop, to end. The air compressed violently, snapping back into place with a force that sent a shockwave through the entire car. The attacker was thrown back again, harder this time, slamming into the far wall with enough force to bend the metal deeper. The second hesitated, then stepped back entirely, his expression no longer just cautious. "Certain. It is collapsing," he said quietly. Emma felt it too. The pressure was no longer stable. It surged and dropped in uneven waves, the space around them flickering between control and chaos. Lucian stood again, turning back toward the threat, his posture shifting from protection to something else entirely. Decision. Final. Outside, the shapes moved faster, their forms pressing closer, the train surrounded on all sides. Inside, the thing in the aisle strained harder, its form beginning to blur at the edges as if it no longer needed to obey the same limits. Emma realized then, with a sharp clarity that cut through everything else, that this moment was ending. Whatever fragile balance had held them together was about to break. And when it did, there would be no more control, only consequence. The moment it broke, it did not shatter outward. It collapsed inward. The pressure that had held everything in place folded suddenly, violently, pulling the air tight before releasing it in a single, silent surge that rippled through the entire train. Emma gasped as the force passed through her, not painful, but overwhelming, like stepping into a current too strong to resist. The lights went out completely. For one long second, there was nothing. No sound, no motion, just darkness. Then everything returned at once. The lights flickered back to life. The train steadied. The pressure was gone. Completely. Emma blinked, her breath coming fast as she looked around. The thing that had been inches from her was gone. Not pushed back. Not destroyed. Gone. The shapes outside the train had vanished as well, leaving only the dark reflection of the car in the window. The metal walls, though bent and strained, were no longer moving. The air felt normal again. Cold, but natural. Human. Emma's arms tightened around her son as she looked down at him quickly. He was still there. Safe. Breathing steadily now, his small body relaxing as if whatever had weighed on him had lifted. Relief hit her all at once, sharp and overwhelming. She exhaled slowly, her eyes lifting again. Lucian stood a few feet away. Still. Unmoving. But different. Not in power. In presence. The force that had surrounded him before was gone. Pulled back. Contained so completely that if she had not seen what he could do, she might have believed he was just another man standing in a quiet train car. The two attackers were still there, but they were no longer advancing. They stood at the far end, their posture rigid, their expressions unreadable. Not defeated. Not victorious. Certain. The first spoke quietly. "It is done." Lucian did not respond. The second added, "The threshold has closed. They cannot cross again. Not like that." Emma's heart slowed slightly, though the tension in her chest had not fully left. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice steady but cautious. The first attacker looked at her directly now. "It means you are no longer hidden," he said. "But you are no longer vulnerable either." Emma frowned. "I do not understand." Lucian finally turned toward her again. The intensity in his gaze had softened, not weakened, but controlled. "They came because something awakened," he said. But it did not fully open. Emma's hand moved slightly, instinctively brushing her wrist where she had felt that strange warmth before. "That was me," she said quietly. Lucian did not deny it. "Yes." Silence followed. But this time, it was not heavy. It was clear. The train slowed gradually, the sound of the tracks changing beneath them, the motion becoming smoother, more grounded. Outside the window, lights began to appear again. Distant at first, then clearer. Buildings. Streets. The world returning. Emma stared at it, her breath catching slightly. "We are stopping," she said. The first attacker gave a small nod. "Now there is a next stop." The train eased to a halt with a soft, controlled motion. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss. Ordinary. As if nothing had happened. Passengers in the next car began to move, unaware, stepping onto the platform as if this was just another late-night ride. Emma hesitated, her feet rooted in place. Then she looked at Lucian. "Is it over?" she asked. Lucian held her gaze for a moment. "This part is," he said. It was not a lie, but it was not everything either. Emma shifted her son gently, adjusting him in her arms as she stepped toward the door. One step, then another. She paused at the threshold, turning back. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Lucian did not answer right away. For a moment, the distance between them felt larger than the space of the train. Then he spoke. "You already will," he said. Emma frowned slightly, but before she could ask what he meant, she felt it. A faint warmth at her wrist. Not painful, not overwhelming. Just there. Constant. She looked down briefly, then back up at him. Understanding came slowly. Not complete, but enough. She gave a small nod. Then she stepped off the train. The doors closed behind her. The train began to move again, pulling away into the night. Emma stood on the platform, her son resting against her, the world around her normal, quiet, unchanged. But she knew better. Because somewhere beyond what she could see, something ancient had awakened. And it had not chosen her by accident.